Terrific to be back. I saw some of you last year. I have a history of unconventional choices. It's kind of my thing. I bought this suit on purpose. I collect tequila on purpose. I moved from Phoenix to Bloomington on purpose for the spectacular weather. But the reason I love to be with you, the reason I'm so pumped to work with Buckingham, is that you also have a history of unconventional choices. I work with hundreds of brands all over the world, and what I love about this organization is that you are fearless. You are not afraid to make unconventional choices. You're not afraid to do things that people in the multifamily industry, in the hospitality industry think are crazy. A lot of your competitors would not do the things that you do every day. That's what sets you apart, and I'm delighted to be a tiny, 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 tiny sliver of that. This is a huge year for Buckingham. I think we all know that. We see the celebrate, the accelerate. There's a lot of things happening all the time, which is super exciting. I think I can help you a little bit with Celebrate. I just got back day before yesterday from a 4-day trip to Jalisco, Mexico, where I went on a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes tequila distillery tours. Like, I've been wanting to do this for like 10 years, finally did it. You can see just how happy I look in that photo. And what's amazing is that many of you look kind of the same. I'm told last night went off the rails for a few of you. We're not going to name any names here, but check the newsletter. There'll be mention of that later. So I think we've got Celebrate covered. Everybody's good on that. Celebrate, check the box there. But when we talk about accelerate, the way we're going to accelerate, the way we're going to press the throttle down in this organization is for our guests and our residents to actually help us do that. Fundamentally, in the world today, we trust each other more than ever. People trust each other more than ever. But the flip side of that is that we trust businesses, organizations, and governments less than ever. That is a mathematical certainty. Part of the reason why that is so is that businesses, when they're trying to acquire new customers, new residents, new guests, they typically go about it a little bit like this. Please watch.
Howdy, y'all, this here's Buck. Down at Mike's Golf Shop, where we buy golf. That's right, we buy golf clubs. Mike's Golf Shop. Come on over here, we buy golf clubs. Over at Mike's Golf Shop. Come on down here, we buy golf clubs. That's right, we buy golf clubs. We buy golf clubs. We buy golf clubs. We buy golf clubs. We buy golf clubs.
He's in Tennessee, so if any of you are in that office, I think he's Murfreesboro. I think that's true, actually. So if you run into him somewhere, you'll know that he buys golf clubs. A+ for consistency of message. We're all good on that. But lower marks for subtlety. This is how it feels sometimes to guests and to residents because we're just pounding on them, and people are like, enough. So instead, what we want to rely upon, instead of us having to tell people that we buy golf clubs, that we have places to live or to stay, we want our guests and residents to do that work for us. And when we do that well, when we unlock the incredible power of word of mouth and referrals, everything gets better. Now, I want to show you what I mean by this mathematically. I'm going to need a volunteer. Austin, come on up here. Austin! Come on up here, man. All right. Austin, tell everybody what you do.
I'm a superintendent.
Where at?
For Buckingham.
Well done. Thank you, Austin. Okay, let's do it this way so we can see this screen. All right. Where do you get information when researching a purchase? These are the top 3 things that people use when they're researching a purchase. Online search, okay? Family and friends. Those are the 3 things that people use most often when researching a purchase. Online search, family, and friends. None of those are advertising. It's all word of mouth, online or offline, right? All 3 of those, all 3 of the main ways that people acquire customers are rooted in word of mouth. Okay, now let's just see how much that's true. What percentage of purchases are influenced by word of mouth? 35%, 45%, or 50%? Will you guys help Austin? Shout it out what you think. 50. Austin, what do you think?
I'm going to go with 45.
Classic superintendent. Right there. That is whatever you think, immaterial, because I am a superintendent. This is like an HR class all of a sudden now. This is incredible. Austin, you're the man. No, it's 50%. It's 50%. But I appreciate you sticking to your guns, though. That's Austin will not be denied. Okay. So, second question, what percentage of people say that a recommendation from a friend or a family member makes them more likely to purchase, okay? What percent of people say that a recommendation from a friend or a family member makes them more likely to purchase something, maybe an apartment? Is it 63%, 73%, or 83%? It's not going to matter, but please tell Austin what you think. Please.
83.
Oh, now he listens. Okay, so great. Okay, let's see. I'm not sure actually what the answer is anymore. 83%. Austin, we've done a great job here. Thank you to all of you. Well done. Well done. Okay, next question. Which generation uses word of mouth the most? Which generation of people relies on word of mouth the most when making decisions? Is it Gen Z, the mysterious Gen Z? Is it millennials? Is it Gen X? Or is it the boomers? Which generation do you think relies on word of mouth the most? Interesting. They're uncertain. Austin?
I'm going with millennials.
Austin says millennials, which literally nobody said. Fantastic. Can we just go on the road together, like all over the country? I'm going to Jacksonville today. Like, cancel your meetings. Let's go. Let's do it. It's actually Gen Z. Gen Z. So what's interesting about this, okay, the younger the consumer is, the more they rely on word of mouth. So who are the future customers of this organization? Obviously, Gen Z. And it's really important, right? Word of mouth is a critical way that we make decisions in all generations, but the younger you are, the more you rely upon it, okay? So this is just gonna get more critical over time. Now, Austin did an incredible job. Don't you agree? Yes. Okay, Austin, because you've been so fantastic, you received this alpaca, ladies and gentlemen. Austin! Well done. Well done. We got a lot of competition. Here's a quick map I created showing all the apartments in Indianapolis. That's scary. That's really, really scary. How do we successfully compete in a climate like that? Well, as your water bottles indicate, the way we do that is with this team, this organization, and the good words from your existing and future residents, which is why we're so excited about the Buckingham experience, this whole movement to focus on customer experience, on resident experience, on guest experience. My team's been working with Becca and a whole group of incredible Buckingham personnel on some really exciting word-of-mouth initiatives for the organization, which we'll be rolling out here this spring. One of the things that's true about business is that competency helps you keep your customers. If you run a good community, if you run a good hotel, people will stay. That's important. We don't want to churn, obviously. That costs us a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of heartache. Competency keeps your customers. But competency doesn't actually create conversations. I don't know all of you yet. I know some of you from previous times that we've been together, but I know this for sure. None of you has ever said, hey, let me tell you about this perfectly adequate experience I just had. We don't say that. Why? Because that's a crappy story. It's not a story worth telling, and it's not a story worth listening to. What we want to do is give guests and residents a story that they want to tell, a story that's interesting to listen to. And the more you try to fit in as an organization, the more your guests and residents will tune out. If you want people to tell a story, the story has to be about something they don't expect. I've never told a story about flicking a switch and lights coming on because I expect that to happen. I've been conditioned to expect that's how electricity works. It's not a story. So we have to do something that they do not expect. And so even when you are hyper competent, as Buckingham clearly is, you guys have it together. And I know that more than most people who would be on a stage because we do work together. So I have some insights into that fact. Even when you're hyper competent, you can still make an unconventional choice to do something different that customers discuss. And when they do that, your customers become your greatest sales and marketing advantage. This is Dr. Chick Wilson. He is a surgeon in Seattle, Washington. He's a different kind of surgeon, however, because Dr. Wilson only does vasectomies. I thought that would get a different reaction. Either everybody at Buckingham has had a vasectomy, or many people are thinking about it and don't want to admit it. And maybe last night changed some minds. Vasectomy business is very competitive in Seattle. It's not as competitive as apartments in Indianapolis, but there's several dozen people that you can see to have a vasectomy if that's your jam. How do you compete in that arena? Because fundamentally, pretty much the same, right? Competency is pretty much assumed. Dr. Wilson, however, being incredibly competent, still has made an unconventional choice to create conversations. It works like this. When you go see Dr. Wilson, after you have the procedure performed, you get 1, 2, 3 things as you check out. You know, you go to the window as you do at a doctor's office. At the window, you get 1, 2, 3 things. First, you get insurance paperwork. Second, you get post-operative care instructions, frozen bag of peas, etc., etc. And the third thing you get from Dr. Wilson, vasectomy surgeon, is a small black box. And in that small black box at Dr. Wilson, vasectomy surgeon, is contained an engraved silver pocket knife that says on it, Dr. Snip, vasectomy surgeon. drsnip.com. Now, you can see how this would create conversation, can you not? You're hanging out with your buddies, you're on your boat, you're playing golf, you're watching football, maybe you open a beer with a bottle opener component, like, bro, that's a sweet knife, where'd you get it? Where'd I get this knife? I got this knife from Dr. Snip, vasectomy surgeon. Here is a fun demographic fact for you. If you have recently had a vasectomy, who is also interested in having a vasectomy? The wife of your friends. Birds of a feather flock together, which is the genius of the knife at drsnip.com. What this is, we call it a talk trigger. A talk trigger is an unconventional experience on purpose that creates conversations. It's something that you choose to do that customers do not expect, and because they don't expect, like, wow, I've never received a silver pocket knife from a surgeon, they tell somebody else about it, which then gets you new customers for free. As many of you know, I wrote a book about this with my friend Daniel called Talk Triggers. There's copies of it on your table. Thank you very much. I think many of you have had a chance to look through it. I appreciate it very much. The book itself has a talk trigger, as you might suspect. Of course, the cover of the book includes alpacas, which is why Austin is now the proud owner of an alpaca. However, many people do not know that's an alpaca. Turns out, Most people think it's a llama. So Daniel and I had to actually commission a giant infographic on the differences between alpacas and llamas and put it on the website. I learned a lesson, which is that llamas have much stronger name identification in this country than do alpacas. So that's a fun fact. So we, as mentioned, are working on a talk trigger for Buckingham as well on the residential side, which we're really excited. You'll hear more about it down the road. But this idea of, yes, of course we're competent. This is an incredibly competent organization, but that doesn't mean that we can win on competency alone. We have to create conversations on purpose, and we're working together to do just that. We have to turn our residents into a powerful marketing advantage. One of the great things about companies like yours is that you have so many potential conversational outlets. You've got thousands and thousands and thousands of people that interact with you every day. On the residential side, on the hotel side, each and every one of them can create new guests, new residents, if we just give them a story to tell. We have to give them something that they do not expect. We're working on this project where we're going to give new move-ins a customized and very unexpected gift when they move into their new apartment. It's super fun, and we can't wait to show you how that's going to look in just a little bit. When guests and residents become volunteer salespeople, it becomes so much easier to accelerate the organization, right? I mean, yes, we can all be good at sales and marketing, but there's all these other people out there who can do that job for us. There's a saying in business, it's one of my favorite sayings. It's from Robert Stevens. Robert Stevens is the founder of Geek Squad. You all know that company, I'm sure, the services arm of Best Buy. And Robert's quote is this: advertising is a tax paid by the unremarkable. Advertising is a tax paid by the unremarkable, meaning that if you have a good enough story, you don't have to spend much money on advertising. Now, that's not 100% true. There's certainly a time and a place for advertising, but it's definitely true enough that when you successfully turn your guests and residents into volunteer marketers, you don't have to work, you don't have to say, we buy golf clubs. Because they'll tell people, those guys buy golf clubs. So one of the things that we're working on is this understanding that this is even more critical in your industry, because when people make a substantial purchase, like where to live, they rely on word of mouth even more than when they're making purchases that are less consequential. Of course, people don't make cavalier decisions about things that have long-term impact on their lives. So while word of mouth is incredibly important for all business types, it is even more important for you. I want to touch on, just so we understand how this works, the 4 requirements of a talk trigger, the 4 things that must be true for something that you decide to do on purpose to actually create conversations amongst guests, residents, etc. And the first thing is it has to actually be remarkable. As I mentioned, it has to be a story worth telling. It has to be something that people will say, oh, that's different, and actually take the time to tell somebody else about. If they've seen it all before, they're not going to tell the story. But sometimes these stories occur in unexpected ways and in unexpected places. For example, does anybody know what the talk trigger is at CVS Pharmacy? Yes, bingo. Here's a tweet. I'm going to have to read this because I can't see off my screen. So, Dave, if I get down here, am I okay? Am I going to get feedback by the speaker? Okay, thanks. So this Colleen goes on Twitter and says, I went to CVS today. It was my first time out of the house since I had the baby. Congratulations, Colleen. And I feel like Superwoman. I did it. I got out of the house. I've never been happier to get an absurdly long CVS receipt in my life. Okay, in that photo, it doesn't really look absurdly long, but you know how Twitter works, it shrinks the photo down? If you actually expand the photo, oh, gotta get closer. There, you can see it, yeah. That's you're like, yeah, that's pretty big. That's a pretty big receipt right there. So what CVS does is when people buy something, they give you a receipt for all these different offers, and maybe you want some nose spray, and maybe you want some, Ace bandage, and it's like really, 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 really long. How long is it? Here's somebody who wrapped a Christmas present. and a CVS receipt. That's long. There's the actual present. You can see that's also really nicely done, I think. That's credit on that one. This young lady found a creative way to use her CVS receipt. The Olympics, I like that one. This one is big props for ingenuity here. This person, one of my blinds broke in my bedroom. So I just went to CVS. That's amazing. And you think about the power of word of mouth, right? This is a customer telling a story about a company. CVS didn't pay for this. This isn't an ad. This isn't We Buy Golf Clubs. Does this have an impact on CVS? Well, this one piece of content, 57,000 retweets and 256, I think it is, 1,000 likes, one photo from an actual customer. You literally can't buy that kind of publicity. Literally, you can't. Has to be remarkable. The second thing that a differentiator must be is it has to be repeatable. And this is an important distinction because a lot of times now in marketing and in business, what we try to do is something really unusual. We try to shock and awe people. And you know what we should do? We should rent an elephant, and then people will notice the elephant and they'll talk about that. Well, you can't have an elephant every day. That's a public relations stunt, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about public relations. We're talking about the Buckingham experience, doing something slightly different on purpose all the time so that every guest, every resident notices it and talks about it. It's every day. It's not in one community. It's not only in Nashville. It's not only on Tuesdays. It's not only on your birthday. It's not only for ladies' night. It's part of what you do. It's not a contest. It's not a campaign. It's not a coupon. It's part of the experience. It's part of the fabric of this organization. And when you do it that way, you can have amazing, amazing success. I want to tell you a story about a company called Windsor One. Windsor One is a manufacturer, not the sexiest business, way less sexy than you guys. They make high-end wooden trim boards. Some of the guys in construction may know this company. Windsor One makes really fancy baseboards and crown molding and wainscoting and chair rails. So their customers are contractors, master craftsmen. They have really nice stuff based in Northern California. Like a lot of manufacturers, they've got a bit of a business challenge in that they've got a pretty broad product line, right? So they make a lot of different kinds of trim, a lot of different stains, a lot of different designs. And how do you communicate the breadth of that product line to a contractor who's not flipping through catalogs and not spending that much time on the internet? What they used to do was We Buy Golf Clubs. They would spend about $600,000 a year buying magazine ads in trade publications. And each of the ad was essentially kind of a mini catalog. We make this, we make this, we make this, we make this, we make this. Call us. They did some tracking on those ads, which is wise, and they discovered that nobody was calling or emailing or going to the website. They were just lighting $600,000 a year on fire. So what if instead we tried to get our customers to do this work for us? What if we got our customers to tell this story? So now, every time you get a Windsor One board, it has on the back of it this stamp. Prime all cuts, which those of you in construction will agree is good advice before cutting something. And then it says, call Kurt for a shirt, 888-229-7900. So you're on the job site, you've got your hard hat on, you're getting ready to cut something, and you're ready, and you're like, let's do this thing. I'm like, who is Kurt? Curiosity will get the best of you in that situation. You pull out your phone, you dial the number, first ring. Hey, this is Kurt. Dude, it's a real guy. Who's this? Oh, it's Jay Baer. Oh, it's fantastic, Jay. Where are you at? I'm at the Alexander in Indianapolis. Oh, it's fantastic. What you working on? I'm renovating a ballroom. Doesn't really need it, but I want to renovate it anyway. Yeah, that's fantastic. Hey, tell me, you a fat guy, Jay? Excuse me, Kurt? Well, I got to figure out what size shirt to send you. What size shirt are you? I'm like an XL if I'm lying to myself. That's great. Well, what kind of products you working with? Oh, I've got this crown moldy and this baseboard. That's great. Well, did you know we also have this other kind, this other kind? See, Kurt is the head of inside sales. And he asked me what I'm working on and then tells me all the other products that I might use that maybe I don't know about. All the new stuff they're rolling out. And then he says, hey, you got anybody else working with you? You're by yourself. Oh, I got like a couple hundred people here. They're all at Buckingham. That's great. Well, how fat are they? Well, Austin's pretty fit. That's great. Next day, on the job site, I get a FedEx box, my name on it. Open up the box. Here's a shirt with my name on it, everybody else's name on it, the right size, medium for Austin, XXX for me, and a sample of all the products we discussed on the call. Company has now doubled in size, spend almost nothing on advertising. Their biggest problem now is finding qualified salespeople named Kurt. It's more of an HR challenge now. And if you've ever been near a job site, as I think many of you have, and if you ever see a shirt like this, now you'll know where it came from. Windsor One and their talk trigger. Super competent company, but they made one decision to do something different in the operations of their business that not only saves them money, but creates new customers because they're turning their current customers into marketers. And we're doing the same thing. Third thing that your talk trigger has to be is it has to be reasonable. Right, it's a shirt. Now, shirts cost money, of course, but it's not a car. Right, one of the things that we fall into a trap of this in business is we try to make it too big. Right, we try to say, well, you know what, we got to break through. You saw all those apartment complexes in Indianapolis. How are they going to know about us? Let's do something crazy that no one's ever going to. We're going to send somebody to the moon. And that never works. It backfires because when you give people experiences that are too grand, it doesn't create conversation. It creates suspicion because they think it can't be true. It's too good to be true. I told you about this last time I was here. It's one of the things I hate about this industry on the residential side. Everybody's got like this super crazy move-in special, right? 47 months free. It's like, wait, how is that? What? That can't be true. It's just BS. People are not that stupid. Right? You can't try to pull one over on consumers. They're too cynical now. And you know who's the most cynical, says guy with 2 teenage children? The Gen Z folks that are so important. They don't believe any of this. So this idea that we're going to have a big promotion and that's going to create conversation, it almost never works anymore. Right? We have to keep it real. You got to keep it real even if your business is about an illusion. Anybody ever go see Penn and Teller in Las Vegas? Anybody? Good. I'll tell you the story. So Penn and Teller, you're probably familiar with them. They're a semi-famous magic duo. Penn's big, tall, loud guy, kind of like me. Teller's short guy, never speaks on stage. And they've been together now for 30 years. For 21 of those years, they've done a show at the Rio Casino Hotel in Las Vegas. They do 6 shows a week. Every week, 21 years. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of shows. More than 6,000 performances of that show. Number one, they change the show all the time, as I do, which is really fun. So you can go anytime. You're not going to see the exact same performance. But their actual talk trigger is more extraordinary than that. It's not the magic. They're really great magicians, and they're really funny. But that's competency, right? That's Dr. Snip actually performing a vasectomy. That's their magic. Like we anticipate that to happen. It's a magic show. We expect magic. Their talk trigger, though, works like this. Every performance, more than 6,000 times in a row, at the end, Penn and Teller run up the center aisle and stand right outside those doors, as I will when we're finished here. And they shake hands, take selfies, sign autographs for every single person in every single audience more than 6,000 nights in a row. Do you know how many times those interactions are shared in social media. Do you know how many times somebody comes back from Vegas and says to their friend, had a great time in Vegas, but you know what was the coolest? You know Teller, the guy who never talks? In the lobby, he talks like a normal person. He can talk. He just doesn't talk on stage. It's a bit, you see. But when you're talking to him as a human being, he's really interesting and smart and funny. That's the story that gets told. It's what propels their success. But that's not a giant gesture. It's reasonable. They're not giving somebody a car. They're just spending a little time with you in a way that you don't expect. You know why you don't expect it? Because nobody else, and I mean nobody else in Vegas does that. You know David Copperfield, the magician? He's at a different casino there. He does the big grand illusions, like I'm gonna make the Statue of Liberty disappear. I'm gonna make the president disappear. He's got all these things. He also gives you the ability to spend a little time with him. One picture, 30 seconds, it's only $100 extra at the box office. David Copperfield is the We Buy Golf Clubs of magicians. Penn and Teller is the Buckingham of magicians. The reason Penn and Teller's talk trigger works so well is that it is an experience. It is something that you actually are in 3 dimensions. And the best talk triggers are exactly that. It's not a slogan, right? It is an experience. I want to read you this quote because it's so important. It's from the consultancy McKinsey, and it says, experiential word of mouth is the most common and powerful form, typically accounting for 50 to 80% of word of mouth activity in any given product category. It results from a consumer's direct experience with a product or service, largely, big key, when that experience deviates from what's expected. As I've told you, if you expect it, why would you tell a story about it? But if you don't expect Penn and Teller to spend time with you, that's a story. Fourth thing that your differentiator must be is it has to be relevant. It has to make sense in the context of who you are and what you are about. This isn't about randomness, because that'll only take you so far. So for example, in the Buckingham experience that we're working on, we're tapping into this organization's support of the arts. It's one of the things that separates Buckingham from competitors, your deep, deep, deep support for the arts. It's one of the things that we're touching on in this experience. For me, as you probably have been able to discern, the plaid suit thing is one of my differentiators. So now, my talk trigger is when people have me come speak, they get to go on this website, which is called dressjbaer.com, and they get to actually pick out the suit that I'm wearing. It's an experience, you see. And it's one that meeting planners talk about all the time. Hotel and apartment reviews, which is nothing other than online word of mouth, right? Reviews are just word of mouth written down on a computer. Hotel and apartment reviews could not be more important. And who is the most important for? Younger people who won't even buy licorice without checking reviews. My daughter's 20. She's a sophomore at Boston University. This summer, she's going to be in Chicago interning for the Graduate Hotel. Some of you may know that organization. Have to find her a place to live for the summer in Chicago. What's the first thing we do? Look at all the reviews of the places near the office. One called the Dwight Lofts, which specializes in summer residency for interns. Reviews are pretty good. 3.7 is not amazing, but she reads all the reviews. And one of the things that makes a big difference here is that even sometimes the reviews are not super positive, every single time, property manager responds. Every time. Makes a huge difference. I wrote a whole book about that called Hug Your Haters that we can talk about sometime. The importance to respond to everybody. Because if you don't respond, it becomes true, whether it's true or not. If you don't respond, it must be true. I'm not suggesting that the guest or the resident is always right, because only a fool would think that. The guest or resident is not always right. Sometimes they are massively wrong, massively wrong. But they should always be heard. And not only does that feel right, but it is right from a business perspective. Responding to unhappy guests and residents every time and as quickly as possible has a colossal impact on what they think about you and, more importantly, what they say about you. Talk triggers create conversations. That's the whole idea. We talked about Dr. Snip, right? This is an actual review. Again, a review is just online word of mouth. Here's an actual review of Dr. Snip. Again, I just want to point out that this is somebody reviewing a vasectomy on Google with their real first and last name. How talkable do you think your vasectomy surgery has to be for you to be like, I'm not even using a burner account. I'm just going, yeah, I'm Cole Stevens. Let me tell you about my experience. The whole experience was great. They were very flexible with scheduling. They were courteous and knowledgeable. I felt at ease the entire time. They made sure I knew what to expect and made very clear what I could do at home to make the process smoother at home. They also have a wonderful sense of humor, clearly, and bedside manner to keep your mind at ease during the procedure. What a great pocket knife, too. I will certainly recommend. Talk triggers create conversation. So what we've got to do is make unconventional choices and deliver customer experiences that create conversations. But here's the thing. We're not going to be able to accelerate unless we are also talkable with each other in this room. One of the things that's true about all fast-growing companies, but I think particularly true about a company like yours, is that you have a lot of what we call in business collisionable moments. And what that means is that you collide against people in other locations, in other departments, in other circumstances, and you need something from them, or they need something from you. You have to actually work together, cooperate to achieve a mutual goal. And as the company gets bigger and more far-flung, those collisionable moments sometimes become more difficult, not less. More friction, not less. Less commonality than before. It's just how it happens. But each of you can be talkable with how you're interacting with one another in all of those collisionable moments. There's 4 different types of talk triggers, 4 different styles that this can be executed on that I want to talk to you about today. There's 5 in the book, but there's 4 I want to talk about today. One is talkable generosity, when you're more generous than somebody expects. And so my question for you is, how can you be more generous than a colleague expects? What can you do for them beyond the minimum, beyond the norm? How can you be more generous than they expect? The second type of talk trigger is talkable usefulness, when you are more useful than somebody anticipates. Very relevant here. How can you be more useful than a colleague expects? Somebody asks you a question, how can you answer that question and then answer some other questions that you think they might have? How can you connect them to other resources in the organization that might make their job easier, better? One of the key talk triggers is talkable speed, responsiveness. Incredibly important in an organization like yours, which is trying to do all the things at once. How can you be faster than a colleague expects? Somebody asks you a question, somebody leaves you a voicemail, somebody sends you a text or an email. Every hour that you let that go, they can't do their job. They can't. They're waiting on you. So the longer it takes you to get back to them, it slows their roll. How can you be faster than colleagues expect? How can you be on top of it so that everybody can execute more and more often? And lastly, how can you be more empathetic than colleagues expect? Look, I get it. I've worked in a lot of companies and for a lot of companies. Sometimes somebody just doesn't rub you the right way. It's like, I don't really like that person, or I don't like the way they asked me, or they're blaming me for something that isn't my fault. All of that happens all the time, especially when you've been drinking. But we have to realize that we're all in this together. If we're going to celebrate and accelerate, we got to stick together. We have to make sure that we keep in mind, just because somebody asked you in a way that you don't appreciate doesn't mean they're a bad person. You don't really know what that person's dealing with. They could be having the worst day of their life. They just happen to be at work, and you're getting caught in the crossfire. There's plenty of oxygen on the high road. And if everybody commits to taking the high road more often than not, it's remarkable how well people get along. Try it. Makes you feel better, too. This is also really important as this company continues to grow because we have to get more people. We have to get more talented people. We have to get more people who are good enough to carry around a water bottle that says, "I'm awesome." Or whatever they say. Something like that, right? It's kind of weird to have a water bottle that says, "I'm awesome." You're like, "Yeah, I'm not that awesome." This is awkward. If we're going to keep getting great people here, and we absolutely have to, word of mouth is the number one way that people find jobs. Number one. So it's incredibly important that all of you tell stories about working here to people that you know, because that's how we're going to get more amazing people and continue to execute on our goals. You've got to tell stories about the people you work with and the work that you're doing. And some of that is only going to happen if we all use those Talk Triggers principles in how we interact with each other each day. I've got a new show that I just started a little while ago. It's actually called the Talk Triggers Show. And I do it every week, every Tuesday on YouTube, 6 or 7 minutes. And there's also a podcast. So if you like audio, you can just search Talk Triggers Show and you'll find it. And each week I do a story, like the stories I've been telling you, about a business that's doing great things with word of mouth and making differentiators on purpose. So some of you may remember I talked about Holiday World last year and how they give away free sunscreen. That's one of the episodes of the show. I just did an episode a couple weeks ago about our good friend, Dr. Snip. So how much time do we have left here? Oh, great. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now, for the first time ever, I literally have never done this, is we're going to do the Talk Triggers Show live. So how this works is I'm going to ask you a question, you're going to shout it out, and then I'm going to tell you the appropriate story. I'm going to give you, the people of Buckingham, one of my favorite clients in the world, and I'm not just saying that. I'm not. A choice. This is choose your own adventure for the last 15 minutes of this presentation. Are you ready? Are you up to the challenge? Yes. Do you want fish or meat? Wow, this is an Indiana crowd. I should have guessed that. We have no interest in fish. There's a lot of people in Bloomington, like I'm from Arizona, which isn't exactly by the sea. But, you know, when I moved here, people are like, "No, I just don't like seafood." I'm like, "You're allergic?" "No, I just don't like it." I'm suspicious of it. Okay. Just to make sure this is official, clap your hands if you want fish. Everybody in the front row, weirdly, clap your hands if you want meat. Jesus. Okay, all right, so now I gotta get to my meat story. Hold, please. All right, there is a hotel in Los Angeles. It's the Intercontinental Hotel. It just opened recently. It's in the big, tall building. I think it's the tallest building in downtown LA. In that hotel, Fancy Pants Hotel, they have a very nice restaurant, not unlike the restaurant you have right here in the remarkable Alexander. It's called La Boucherie, and somebody who speaks better French can probably pronounce that in a much more elegant way than I did. They've got competency, right? They make great steaks. It's a French steakhouse. You know, terrific meat, and obviously a gorgeous view, right? The top of the building in LA, you can see all of the Los Angeles basin and all the smog. Their talk trigger, however, is pretty cool. Again, it's an experience, just like Penn and Teller. You sit down, you order a steak, because that's what you do there, and they come out, the waiter, and it might even be the maitre d', comes out and gives you a second menu. You might think, well, what is the menu of side dishes? What is the menu of wines? Are they giving me dessert menu ahead of time just so I can kind of think what I'm going to have later? No. It's a menu of steak knives. You get a choice of all the different steak knives. French, Italian, American, English, and they say, "Mr. Baer, with your porterhouse, which of these knives would you like to use?" And I'm like, sharp one? But it's amazing, right? Because no one's ever asked you, what steak knife do you want? You've never had to think this through. And so it takes them a long time. It's funny that they actually do it because it takes you a long time because like, I don't know how to make that decision. You're like, well, can I trust them? Yeah. So then now you're feeling them on. There becomes the whole process. Oh, that's got nice balance. So and you're going through this whole thing, right? It's like a dance. Like, oh, this one feels really good in the hand. It's got Crocodile Dundee has a knife, right? And you're doing this whole thing, and then you finally pick one. No one's ever done that for me. No one's ever done that for anybody. Steak knife menu. All kinds of people talking about it in social media, taking pictures of it just like this. This is a photo that an actual diner took. Steak knife menu, right? Talkable usefulness. Get to pick your own knife. All right. Are you ready? Would you like to hear about angels or elves? Clap your hands if you want angels. The 7 people who didn't go out last night. Clap your hands if you want to hear about elves. Okay. All right, you asked for it. New York City has a lot of challenges. Traffic, one of the biggest. Traffic in New York City affects everybody, but it's really a problem if you're in the vehicle repair business, because you got to get cars to the repair center. And it takes forever, right? It's a big hassle. There's a business here called Paragon Honda and Acura. They're the largest Honda Acura dealer in New York State. As many of you may know, if you're in the car business, generally speaking, you make more money on service than you do on sales. You might make $1,000 on a new car sale, but the idea is that if you do service for 3-5 years, that's where you make your money. Okay, but if it's that hard to get somebody's Acura to the dealership because of traffic in New York, they're like, I'm just going to go on the weekend by my house. Paragon faced with this challenge. How do we get people's cars to the dealership to do service? Their first idea was, let's build 4 service centers, 1 in each corner of Manhattan, so that we're closer to where people's cars are during the day. Bring it at lunch. Problem was, that was going to be a $40 million tab just for the real estate. And then you got to build on top of that. So let's try something else. So now they invented this thing called Paragon Direct. Their big epiphany was this. When do people not need their cars? At work for some people. But nobody needs their cars when they're sleeping. Paragon Direct's mobile app works like this. You set up service on your phone, you go home, you leave Manhattan, you go to Connecticut, Jersey, wherever you live, Queens. After you get home, Paragon Direct comes to your house, picks up your car, takes it to their service center, fixes it overnight like magical elves, and brings it back to you in the morning before you have to leave for work. And if you need something else done, they just send you a text message, hey man, also by the way, your oil filter's shot. Here's what yours looks like. Here's a new one. Press yes to approve. Tripled their business, and now they're building even more overnight service centers, because why would you not do that as a consumer? Like, why would you say, no, it's okay, I'll bring it at lunch? No way. If you can do it overnight, of course you're going to do that. And it makes them so much more money too, because now they're working double shifts, right? They're working all day, and they've got a night crew, so it's so much more efficient for the business as well. It is literally like a magic trick. It's like a Penn and Teller auto repair magic trick. Like, wow, here it is, back in the morning. They just reimagined what people expect. See, talk triggers are all about expectations. Everybody expects that you bring your car in during the day because that's when service centers are open. But what if you didn't do that? If you just start to reimagine what people expect, all kinds of new ideas are opened up to you. Last one, I think. Collection calls or conference calls? All right, who wants collection calls? Everybody in finance. Everybody running a P&L. Who wants conference calls? Oh. All right, we're doing both. It's a tie, so we're going to do both. I mentioned a few minutes ago about empathy, about treating each other with kindness and respect, taking the high road. There's a business that does that is in an industry where that is definitely not the norm. It's a company called AmeriCollect. They're outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin. AmeriCollect is a collections agency. They specialize in medical collections. So they collect fees on behalf of hospitals and physicians groups. So their job, quite literally, is to call and call and call and call and call and call and call people until they're so frustrated they just pay their bill so they won't call anymore. If there is any industry in the world that is less about empathy than collections, please see me later because I would like to know what it is. It is by definition not about empathy, unless you're AmeriCollect. AmeriCollect's slogan, but it's not just a slogan. It is literally the DNA of the organization. It is ridiculously nice collections. And that's how they handle it. They've got to call somebody, they treat them like family. Their approach is if you treat somebody incredibly well, when they get back on their feet, who are they gonna pay first? The people who have been incredibly great to them, or the people who have absolutely ground them down, humiliated them, and made them feel like less of a person? Sounds good on paper, right? Makes you feel good. Also works in practice. In the collections business, turns out, I didn't know this till I started working with these guys, turns out there's a thing that happens where if you're a hospital, physicians group, what you do is you take your debt and you give half of it to company A and half of it to company B, and you give them 60 days or so, 60, 90, to collect as much as they can. They call it a shootout. It's like an A-B test if you're in digital marketing, same idea. It's just a shootout. So they say, okay, you get half, whoever gets the most after 90 days, now you get all of it going forward. They just test it. Since AmeriCollect moved to the ridiculously nice collections approach 20 years ago or so, they have been victorious. Out of 2,000 shootouts, they have been the winner 1,997 times. They always win, because of course they do. But that's not the best part of this story. December, I went out to AmeriCollect. Their CEO, Ken Lingretz, who's featured in the book, some of you may remember the story if you've read the book, they had me come out and meet with their whole team, just like this, annual meeting, almost the exact same size group. It was at Green Bay. Then we went to a Packers game, which is really fun. Quick aside, it was the Packers versus the Cardinals, which is my team because I'm from Arizona. And the Cardinals beat the Packers that day, which hadn't happened in like 60 years. And the next morning, Mike McCarthy, the Packers coach, was fired. So I felt like I had a little hand in that. And it was weird because he did a stadium tour the night before. We actually met him. We're like, in the bowels of him. Hi, I'm Mike McCarthy. I'm like, hey, next morning, fired. I'm like, well, that was weird. Like a dead man walking thing I didn't even know. Anyway, so I go to the meeting, and afterwards, I asked Kenlon, like, so, you guys it's a pretty remote location. Like, Green Bay's not that big, but they're like suburban Green Bay, which doesn't really even make any sense. It's like, it's out there. I'm like, well, where do you get all these people? Like, you got a lot of employees. Like, where do they come from? He said, here's the thing, Jay. They got 250 people in the main office. 60% of their team members are people that they originally collected from. I want you to think about that for a second. Can you imagine being treated so empathetically by a collections company that you say, you know what? When I get back up on my feet, when I get some money in my pocket, when I get these bills paid off, I want to go work for those guys. Man, it gets me every time. It's extraordinary. It's just absolutely extraordinary. Love those guys. Anybody ever use the service Uber Conference? A couple people. Uber Conference is an online free conference calling service. There's lots of those. There's 10 or 12 of them now, where you can just say, okay, we want to get together and we're going to have people dial in from different locations, as you all do. What do you guys use here? Skype. So it's like Skype, but no video. It's only calls. And a lot of people use it. It's a big company. It's part of a much larger company called Dialpad. And they've got tens of thousands of customers. But fundamentally, free conference calling on the internet, which used to be like a moonshot, now is like, okay, everybody does it. And they all do the same thing, right? Skype does the same thing, Zoom, they all do the same thing. So how do you compete? Competency, the calls can't drop. Quality has to be fine. But they do it with a talk trigger. And theirs is talkable attitude. You don't expect a whole lot of sense of humor from a conference calling company, do you? Generally, no, but they do. And it's with their on-hold music. The overwhelming majority of on-hold music is terrible. It's single-handedly keeping Kenny G in business, I think. It's it's all smooth jazz. I think that's a constitutional amendment. Uber Conference does it different. Their CEO, who also is in a band, sat down and wrote on-hold music that goes a little bit like this.
Oh, yes, I'm on a roll. Hope it's not all day.
The song is about 7 minutes long, and it is a riot. It's about this guy who showed up to the conference call, and he's like, where is everybody? And then he gets off the call, and then they all show up, which has happened to everybody in the history of the universe. It is such a funny song that a band, a real recording band, covered it, did a cover song of an on-hold song, and actually tours around it. The band, some of you may know it, they're playing here, I think, pretty soon. It's called Postmodern Jukebox, and they do like remixes of all kinds of funny songs and popular hits. So they're a famous band, and they actually covered an on-hold song. That's how good it is. Has a huge impact. Again, what are ratings and reviews on social media? Word of mouth on a computer. Here's a tweet. So Uber Conference hold music sneaks up on you and then is so good and hilarious, you don't want anyone else to join the call. Call canceled. I'm just going to sit here and hang out now. You guys enjoy. Acceleration demands one thing, which is a culture of curiosity. We have to think about what do guests and residents expect and what can we give them that they don't expect. We're working on that with Becca and a committee, but it applies to each and every one of you in what you do every day, not only in how you interact with customers and guests, but how you interact with one another. We've got to be the best that we can possibly be together and be the best that you can possibly be individually as well. But let's remember, competency doesn't create conversations. This is an incredibly competent organization, and we can never lose that. But that just keeps the people you've already earned. People don't talk about competency. They talk about something that they don't expect. What we have to continue to do in Buckingham is make unconventional choices on purpose and give residents and colleagues and guests a story to tell. And if you give them that story to tell, they will tell it. They'll tell it offline, they'll tell it online. And that story that they tell about you and the story that you tell about each other every day in those collisionable moments, we call that a talk trigger. Thanks so much for having me back and for all the hard work. I really appreciate it. Thanks, you guys.